And then you go from working with the click, and 40's got the Sahabs and all this
Hmm.
weird different language that he's got. And then Sibo is very straightforward, blunt, direct, straight gang
Hmm.
banging, no
Hmm.
confusion, no real
Yeah.
mystery of his raps. So
Right.
for you as a person and as a producer, what's that adjustment like going from somebody that's more esoteric and creating his own language to then going
Hmm.
to somebody who's so blunt and direct and forceful?
Um, it's basically adapting to my environment. You know what I mean? It wasn't really, like I said, I really don't know other than just me just adapting and respecting a different art form, a different way of rapping and different way of whatever. You know what I mean? So, okay, it was like a challenge. It turned into a challenge. Like, okay, 40 and B, you rap this way. Sibo, okay, you rap that way. So now I got to do this type of, I want to go this way with Sibo. You know what I mean? We went that way with 40. So that's, like I said, I didn't technically think that then, but that's obviously what I did. You know what I mean? I'm looking back, I know what I did now. I adapted to Sibo's style because the approach was different and the sound was different. You know what I mean? Sibo was a little more spookier and darker and melodic. You know what I mean? And 40, it was a different type of mob, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Gas Chamber, the Gas Chamber song itself doesn't really have a chorus. So as you're going in and making these songs, especially now understanding more Sam Bostic with R&B, like how was it like for you guys to say like, okay, we're not going to have any choruses on these songs. Some songs will have them, because it was always interesting to me. Rap went from in the 70s with the routines and stuff, and then
Mm-hmm.
Rappers Delight later. But then as we get, it was going through all these different waves where it was just like, there was just, they stopped rapping after they said the song title, and then they came back for the second verse.
Yeah.
Whereas before they had, look at Houdini, they had melody, they had choruses, they had everything. So
Yeah.
how did you as a producer, sonically, visually, artistically, know when, okay, we're going to like the song Gas Chamber, there's no chorus, versus some of these other songs later in your career or even around this time where there's real choruses?
Mm-hmm.
How did you navigate that musically as a producer?
Well, I think we were still learning arrangement skills then. You know what I mean? We wasn't really we did know intro, verse, chorus, but we still were learning and babies in the industry, in the music producing wise. So we wasn't paying attention to okay, Sibo, this one's not gonna have a hook and that one we wasn't really we didn't even that's not even what we were thinking. We were just like I say, we were just doing some stuff, trying out some stuff, seeing what's gonna stick, you know what I mean? And it felt so good and the song was so good that Sibo just kept rapping. It was more so a thing about what Sibo wanted to do with that particular song. It was a more of a writer's thing, you know what I mean? And we made it feel like it may have had a breakdown just due to the arrangements that we were doing, dropping stuff out, taking it in and out, and moving it around, and so it felt like it may have been a hook, but but the groove was so groovy that you didn't even care that it wasn't a hook. So it was like a ride along song. You just rolled right through it. You know what I mean? So like I say, we didn't really, purposely think about, okay, so we didn't have so much structure, which is what made it actually good because it was a a mixed box of chips. You know what I mean? It was a variety pack, of different arrangements and different song skill sets.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things that now I think we've gotten away from. I
Hmm.
guess it's coming back in a way, because this a lot of people make songs that are really short now.
Yeah.
But they're all short. Whereas back in the
Yep.
day, there would be some songs would be a minute and a half long. There'd be a song that'd be 7 minutes long, like
Yeah.
Dope
Yeah.
Fiend Beat or Freaky Tales or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And looking at LL Cool J or even Paul and Jen, if we keep it with Too Short, that was a short song, like time
Yeah.
wise. But
Yeah.
now I think stuff is so like, oh, this works, so this is the formula now. Whereas
Yeah. Yeah.
gas chamber, all this E-40 stuff that you did, um, is that because not only the experimentation, but also the expectation of, well, this isn't going to be on the radio, or we're not going to do some big video, so we can just make what we want to make. Did that
Yeah.
just factor in that way for you too?
Yes, it did. It did. Yep, we did think about that. On a lot, that's one thing we did think about is okay. You know what? Just we're specifically making this for the radio, not even knowing what it took to even get on radio. We just were assuming, okay, this is going to be our radio song, or that was. But we'll purposely try and do radio songs and album songs. True enough, but sometimes the album songs will end up being a radio song. So now we got to go back and cut it and edit it. But back to the whole how you saying songs are short and long. I noticed this back then. I noticed that Four Deep, it was a short song, and it was, I think it was only two verses. I think it was. It was like one of the best songs because it was so short. You know what I mean? And I think it has something to do today in today's music. The quicker you can get to the chorus and to the bridge and to the hook or even a pre-hook to the sing-along part, the better it is, and the more of it. That's what hit songs are arranged about, especially with this whole internet, social media. People's mind frame and attention span is so short now. So you have to get to the chanty, hypnotic part of the song where even a kid can sing. You know what I mean? So I realized that back then. That's what I did learn in the 90s, that the shorter the song, that it leaves people wanting more. You know what I mean? But then you do have to have those songs that are just like a gas chamber, where it's just a straight through groove song.
Yeah, and to your point, always thought with Four Deep, since you mentioned that, it does have the same music or instrumentation of the bridge, which I also
Mhm.
thought was interesting too, because some of your stuff, not most of it, since you do live instrumentation, doesn't have samples or doesn't
Mhm.
use the same exact stuff. So I always find it interesting when you do sample different things, or you do incorporate different things. So
Yeah,
what on Four Deep then in particular with the bridge, why you remember why you wanted to use that there in
yeah,
particular?
yeah. Because so early, if you listen to the gas chamber, it's a lot of samples. Because I was fresh out of DJing, you know what I mean. So even on like gas chamber, I loop. I'm a hoe in the background, and there's like splashes from barcades, like hits. You know what I mean? Certain hits from certain things, but there's a lot of samples that I dropped in there. But I felt like that was a dope style to have a sample. But the bridge was one of my dope favorite songs. So I always liked it, the way it sounded eerie. And so Sam encouraged me. He's like, man, I would find a sample and I would take a sample and I would loop it. And then I would have Sam play some dope stuff over it. And we just like, man, it was a different thing. You know what I mean? It was a mixture of a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? And it turned out to me be melodically dope. But the bridge I just liked that song. You know what I mean? So I'm like, man, let me put some music on top of this and see what happens. We're just trying stuff. And it
Mhm.
worked. You know what I mean? I like that song a lot.
Yeah,
So deep. Yeah.
yeah. And then another thing too with Real Than Real off Gas Chamber, that story and stuff is so deep and so violent and so angry, as a
Mm-hmm.
lot of Sibo's music around this time was. But that being said, as a producer, when you're like, how does it affect you? Because he's talking about the click video and all this other stuff in the song, and you
Mm-hmm.
know the click, you work with the
Mm-hmm.
click, and now he's rapping about them. I assume they weren't there with you guys when they was making it, but the point is, or my question is, when you're hearing these stories and you're knowing that they're real and they're so like filled with a lot of venom and anger, how does that affect you personally? And then how do you work to execute that musically?
So it didn't necessarily affect me personally. It kind of like it was kind of like me reliving the story because I was around him when that was happening. So I'm like sitting there like everybody else, interested. Like, oh yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, that did happen. Let's make a music around this story that we're telling. We're reminiscing of something that we were experiencing. So it was like like a release and reliving the whole story or whatever. So it was actually a fun thing actually to actually watch and see, you know, because for one, we seen it and we didn't realize that what we were doing was storytelling and allowing other people to imagine the same thing. You know what I mean? It was just like a fun vibe or something fun to be a part of when I would hear people tell stories or want to tell those type of stories. Just like Ghetto Flight, you know what I mean? I was there with Sibo when that happened, you know what I mean? And so it's like, man, yeah, we got to do one because of that. You know, we make songs off of our experiences. And like I say, I was fresh out of DJing and hustling, and Sibo was fresh out of gangbanging for real. And I seen him doing it. I didn't know him outside of that. I just knew him musically. But I seen him, you know what I mean, at the Fort, actually it was a Fort Deep shoot, but he made the song Ghetto Flight. So that was Sibo's thing. He's a dope storyteller. You know what I mean? He can really paint a picture with some lyrics. You know what I mean?
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of the samples on Gas Chamber, the Play for G were the Houdini 5 Minutes of Funk. I'm always excited when somebody samples Houdini. I'm a hoe, of course, too. But
yeah,
it always also baffles me that their songs have been used and sampled so much, but they don't have more reverence as one of the most important, influential groups, especially in the
right.
in the first decade of rap on record. So, why do you think Houdini isn't revered and celebrated more?
I think because at the time they were kind of like considered soft rappers. They were soft in comparison to everybody else. You know what I mean? But and they were really doing the right thing. They was going after the ladies. You know what I mean? They didn't really care about the dudes like that. You know what I mean? But I recognized the musicality and I loved the way that they were talking. And they were one of our favorite groups because they would come out to the Bay Area and they would do concerts. You know what I mean? The Rock the Bells concert and this and that. And Houdini would be there, you know, with the Grandmaster DJ. And that I really liked Houdini. I still like Houdini. They got some dope productions and, you know what I mean? Some dope records, you know what I mean? So I always played those songs, you know, it's like Short with Friends, you know what I mean? That's what really had us really big time Houdini fans. So I would just stay into their catalog and looping I'm a Hoe and, you know, doing, you know, 5 Minutes of Funk and Play for G and all that kind of stuff. That's my space, you know what I mean? Houdini. But yeah, I think that people thought they were too soft and they, you know, but they really, if you think about what they really did by them going to, I think they was in the UK and they was dealing with Thomas Dolby and a bunch of the high powered musicians in the studio. It was like a really orchestrated thing that they really had. If you really listen to their music, it was really intricate, you know, and well produced. And it was different. It wasn't like regular hip hop. It was international hip hop. And so I think it really, to me, it put them in a whole nother genre to me. You know what I mean? Versus, and that's probably why nobody really pays them attention like that until, you know, somebody die, basically, you know?
Yeah, that's a shame. But
Mm-hmm.
I also think too, because they were so melodic, it was
Mm-hmm.
also very, you know, Curtis Blow had melody and the Fat Boys had melody because of Curtis Blow and all this different
Yep.
stuff. But
Yep.
Houdini's the level of musicianship, I think, was just different with what
was.
Larry Smith was doing with them. And
Yeah.
even on a Freaks Come Out at Night type of song, 5 Minutes of Funk, One Love, you know,
Yeah.
even Big Mouth, which was harder.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I love
Yeah.
Houdini. But
Me
yes.
too.
So this being said, with Gas Chamber and with Down and Dirty to Click, they're doing well. You know, they're getting regional success especially. But then how does your career evolve? Because it's not like today where everybody just knows everything that everybody's doing all the time. It's a little bit more like, if you don't know these two albums, or if we want to include Let's Side, if you don't know these things, how somebody like a Mac Mall find you to get you to work on Untouchable?
Because it was all in the same clique of people. It was the same circle of people. You know what I mean? So we're all going to studios um and they found Mac Mall found me through Layla Steinberg. So Mac Mall was being represented and working with Layla. And so and then I know Layla from Atron Gregory and Tupac. So that's how I ended up segueing into, and then of course in the streets, my name is, me and Sam Boss's name is ringing in the streets, in the area, with the Selly Cells and the Little Bruces and all the different people. And so Layla, put me with Maul, and so that's how we ended up, and then something happened with Kyrie. And I, was hot on the streets at the time. And so Mac Maul like, okay, I want to do a few songs with you. And so he came to my studio and we started working,
Yeah. So that being said, this explosion that happens with the volume of work that, it's one thing to make beats by yourself in your one bedroom apartment. It's another thing to have Be Legit beats, Click beats, Selly Cell beats, Sibo beats, and to have them really coming out. I mean, these songs are coming out. They're doing what they're doing independently or through Jive or Mac Malls on Relativity at the time. So how did like the business change for you, and how did how you were making music or how you were approaching making music change around this 94 era, where before we get to In a Major Way, but things are still like way bigger than they were a year or two ago?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we well, me and Sam, we were just, before we realized it, we had produced like 20 something albums, you know what I mean? So our head was to the ground and we just was just working. We didn't really even pay attention to anything. We were just like, oh, you want some tracks? Oh, okay, come on, let's go. Oh, you want some tracks too? Okay, let's go. It was that type of thing. And then we finally looked up, and then, like you say, they all were coming out, and now they all in there flooded the streets. And so that just made us just segue us into some other stuff, and then prior to all of that stuff, or after the SIBO, we did a deal with Sick With It to produce the Selly Cells and the Little Bruce and the Smack Shines and the Funk Mob and the just their whole roster, Sugar T's, and so D.O.C, the Click album. So that's how we ended up doing it. And then, like you say, our head, then the music changed. Like you say, that's when we got, okay, you know what, this is real now. Now we have a major deal. Now it's going to turn into starting getting accolades and really being recognized on a national level. You know what I mean? That's when we, really took it to the next. We were actually practicing up until the point of the Major Way. You know what I mean? And that was the beginning of our super professional career. Because all those other albums was independently out the trunk albums. You know what I mean? Those were just local albums that kind of like made it out of state, but they didn't make it nationwide or even worldwide,
Well, let me ask this though. What about, because Untouchable was on Relativity, and that was it wasn't Def Jam or, Jive, but Relativity was big at the time too. You didn't see it wasn't a marked difference for you yet until In a Major Way?
Nah, because In a Major, because that McMall and 40 was kind of like in the same time frame, same window a little bit, you know what I mean? But because Jive had given out $3 million and 40 was on the cover, and they said $3 million, just that and other, it just seemed like it was a bigger thing happening, you know what I mean? Then I can't really say that McMall was, because McMall thing was huge for us because I went to New York, and that was my first time going to New York. You know what I mean? And that's when I first met Steve Lobel, and he introduced me to Common and Fat Joe, and just when Big Pun was still around, I was supposed to do stuff with Big Pun, But that's when, like I said, that was when 40 was still around too, though. It was Sprinkle Me. That's when all that stuff was around in the same window time frame, producing wise. Maybe within 6 months of each other, as far as being in the studio. But yeah, I think that's why Jive felt a little bigger, because it opened up some other doors. It opened up like publishing deal doors. You know what I mean? Because it was on Jive. The Relativity stuff, they wasn't talking about no publishing deals and no this. It wasn't that type of a thing, but it definitely was a huge next level of business. Like I say, because they flew me to New York, and I think Rick Rock come with me then too. I think he came with me back then.
Be sure to check out the History of Gangster Rap by Soren Baker. He's official.
History of Gangster Rap features exclusive interviews with Ice-T, Snoop Dogg, MC Ren, the D.O.C, and dozens of others. The History of Gangster Rap, a definitive look at how Los Angeles changed rap forever.
In Los Angeles, the streets definitely set the tone of the hip-hop music.
At 19, I got a $50,000 car.
My whole angle always was, I'll be street, but I will always tell you the horrors that go along with this life.
There will be penalties and casualties for just wearing the wrong color in somebody's neighborhood.
And once gangster rap made it from the streets to the TV, the genre exploded.
With Fab 5 on Your MTV Best with NWA.
Yo MTV, it just catapulted us from being local heroes to national gangbang rappers.
The History of Gangster Rap discusses it all from 1980 up till today.
It's always gonna be shit happening in the streets. You know what I mean? So it's always gonna be something to talk about.
The History of Gangster Rap in stores now.